You're now listening to the 1130 podcast. Enjoy the show.
I'm from the city, DC, that's where I'm from. 1130 podcast, Dre and Willsy is the one. Let's get it, yeah. Who with me? Let's get it, yeah. No, with me, yeah. I'm from the city, DC, that's where I'm from. Let's get it. 1130 podcast, Dre.
Yo, what it do, everybody, man? What's goody? Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the 1130 podcast. What's goody? How everybody doing out there, man? We back at it. I'm back at it. Y'all already know it's your man Dre, aka Dre on Wheels, man, for another episode of the podcast show. For everyone who's tuning in, man, if you're new to the show, or if you just haven't done so already, I don't know what you're waiting for, man. Definitely hit that like button down below. Comment also, man. Definitely subscribe to the 1130 podcast right here on YouTube, man. I thank everyone, and definitely don't forget to follow the 1130 podcast on all social media platforms. All right, man. Now that's out the way, the sun is shining bright today. Man, I'm excited, man. For real, I got a real cool guest, you guys, that's going to be joining on this episode of the podcast show. My guy Mark Anthony, you guys, music artist, entrepreneur, real cool guy, man. Also, he's a huge wrestling fan. You guys know I am as well. But yeah, man, we're gonna be bringing my guy Mark on and chatting with him, chopping it up with him. It's gonna be real dope and great. But we ain't gonna waste no more time. We gonna get right into it. Mark, how's it going?
Hey Dre, how you doing today?
Doing well, man. Doing well. The sun is shining. Another day, so I'm doing all right, man. How about yourself?
Good. The sun is shining here. It's a little chilly here. I'm just outside of Toronto here in Canada, so of course we're going to be hitting that cold weather pretty soon. So
yeah, it's chilly here. It's starting to get real cool now, as you can see. Well, I'm a sweater guy, so I kind of like always have my sweaters on in the way, especially when I'm doing the podcast, especially my merch, my own stuff. But yeah, it's definitely chilly outside, man. I like it when it's like 70 degrees, maybe 80. Yeah, but yeah, you say you're outside of Toronto? You're from Canada?
Yeah, I'm just outside of Toronto. I live in a town called Brampton, which is maybe like a 20-minute car drive to Toronto.
Okay, cool. How is life being from, where you just say you were from, and also Canada, man?
Well, I mean, over here it's all right. I mean, we have our issues just like everybody has issues in their own cities as well, but it's pretty good. I mean, I can't complain. We have we have decent weather here in the summer, and in the wintertime it gets pretty snowed in here, but musically it's very interesting over here. It's very diverse, lots of different genres of music that are popular in amongst the clubs around here. As you know, I play more of the hard rock, progressive rock style of music here. There's a scene for that here as well. Maybe not as big as some of the rock and some of the hip hop or other areas in here are a bit larger as far as the scene goes, but it's pretty diverse here.
Okay, cool. How long you been into music though? Was it always sort of a thing growing up though?
Yeah, well, my family, we always used to listen to music all the time in this house here. So I grew up in a musical house, and then I got into playing guitar pretty young, like about 14 years old. I started playing guitar and then had my first band by 16 years old, and actually did my first little sort of demo recordings at a studio at 16 years old as well. So it's nothing really to write home about when you're 16. You're very young and, just trying to learn how to write songs. But, years and years later now, I mean, I've been keeping at it and writing music and releasing records, and got a chance to tour the world a few times with other bands that I was in. So it was a great, it's been a great life so far.
Hey man, that's what's up. Who's some of your favorite music artists that really sort of inspired you on this journey of yours? I know you said, hard rock and stuff like that. Yeah, who was some bit of inspiration of yours along this journey?
Well, I mean, when I was younger, I have an older sister. She's 7 years older than me, so she was into the music early and kind of really influenced me a lot of the ways. Obviously, Kiss I was a big band for me growing up. Led Zeppelin was a big band as well, Styx and stuff like that. And then also there was a lot of other bands, like Rush is one of my favorite bands that I love. They're a Canadian band, and I love bands like I don't know, there's like Metallica's big for me as well. Megadeth. I tend to go more to the heavier side of the musical genre. But I mean, I also grew up with bands like Yes and Genesis and stuff like that as well. So it's kind of a diverse bit of listening to. But I mean, also over here as well, we had like a lot of Canadian bands like the Tragically Hip and Sloan and bands like that that are more like straight ahead pop or pop rock as well. So I listen to pretty much everything.
Okay, hey, that's dope. That's dope. I like how you said Metallica, man. Most of I know we're gonna get into it in just a bit, though. I mentioned how I'm a big wrestling fan, and
Mhm.
you are too. And I know me growing up watching wrestling, that's how I was really introduced to more so like hard rock or that type of metal, music. Where and you mentioned Metallica, who definitely done numerous things for our songs, with the WWE.
Yeah.
And I think because obviously from my community, growing up listening to hip hop, yeah, that's cool, But when I started to tune in and watch wrestling, I was like, man, this other genre of music was just man, it's beautiful. It was just it though. How does music make you feel when you're writing it down or going into performing it or something like that?
Well, yeah, it definitely gives me a feeling of energy and stuff like that when I listen to it. I mean, like you mentioned when you talked about the wrestling bit, I never forget when I first heard Triple H's theme on Motorhead, the game, that whole song there. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I was like really taken aback by that because I was a Motorhead fan for a while, but then I didn't realize that they were so connected with the whole wrestling community as well, right? So in a song like that, when you hear it, you can feel that energy, and it's like Triple H changes into a totally different person when that music is playing behind him when he comes up to the stage there, right, and onto the ring. So when I write my own music, I kind of look at it the same way. If when I write it and I play it back and listen to it, if I feel that impact in me, it's touching me somewhere, then I know I'm on the right path.
Mhm. Okay, okay. I think that's awesome, man. I think that is really dope, man. Music definitely touches us in all types of shapes or form or ways and such like that, and definitely lifts us up. Even when we're going through stuff. So I think that is definitely awesome, though. But along this journey, though, like you said, at a young boy, what was the moment that really sort of I feel like I asked this question. I'm not too sure, but what was the moment that you was like, what, music is something that I love and I'm going to do, to, for my life.
Well, when I was about 12 years old, my sister took me to a concert, and my parents were alarmed that she was taking me, such a young boy, to a concert here in Toronto. And I went to see Rush here at Maple Leaf Gardens. And when I first saw them perform on stage, and I'd never seen a live band perform like that before. And when the lights came down and they came out on stage, and that overwhelming feeling of this loud music playing through the speaker system and them playing their music, it just totally overwhelmed me for that next hour and a half. My eyes were glued to that stage for the whole time. I mean,
Mhm.
you could have had the Queen pass in front of me. I would have never even noticed because I was so focused on the stage at that moment. And it was a fantastic moment. And I said to my sister on the subway ride back that I go, this is something I wish I could do for myself. And she looked at me and she said, well, why can't you? If you learn to play an instrument, and then maybe one day you'll be good enough, you can get on stage and do it. And I took it seriously. And I was fortunate enough to get into a couple of bands and form a few bands, and tour Canada a couple of times. And then I was in another band that was pretty popular back in the 80s that reformed in the 2000s. And I ended up going to do a tour of Europe and doing some shows in the United States. So it's been very rewarding, this whole musical adventure. I mean, that's where it kind of all started for me. It was when I
Mhm.
saw Rush play at Maple Leaf Gardens back when I was like 12 years old.
Okay, okay. You mentioned one thing also. You said music has been very rewarding to you. Can you speak about that? Because a lot of people who definitely get into music, regardless of what genre it is, though, sometimes the music industry, I mean, yeah, it's rewarding, far as, You probably don't have to worry about, nothing financial. You're financially stable, et cetera, though. But how has the music been to you? I know you're giving it all, but how has it been to you?
Well, when I talk about being rewarding, I'm not talking so much about it from the monetary side of things. While I am okay, I'm not, I can't complain.
Yeah.
I'm talking about more as, like, for my soul.
Okay.
For playing this music. Let's put it this way: in some of the lowest times in my life, whenever I've had some issues or there's been family problems or whatever, if maybe illness, I didn't feel good or wasn't doing well, music was the thing that kind of lifted me up from the doldrums up. Just putting on a good record sometimes was enough to change my mood, put a smile on my face. Writing music, it's alone there has been a very rewarding thing for me myself. I make it a habit that every day I come into my room here and work on music. I have my keyboards around me. I got my guitars here, microphone behind me there. And whenever the muse hits me, I come here and start writing my music. And there's nothing more rewarding to me than spending an hour or two coming up with some ideas and then putting it to tape or to digital form as it is now, and listening back to it and saying, wow, that was pretty decent what I came up with. And it slowly turns into a record down the line. And that's why I find the reward, not so much the money end of it. Sure, I do sell records and CDs.
Yeah.
I have this is the last record I put out here. This is the Projekt Gemineye album that I just put out not long ago, and it does well. I'm not selling millions of albums or nothing, but it's selling enough that that it's making me worthwhile to continue doing it. I even put out some vinyl as well of my records as well. And those are all things that I find rewarding also because I've connected with a lot of great people. I have a great supportership base here where people have constantly bought my records and supported me. So I've never looked at the reward more like monetarily as much as it is that I just feel satisfied in my soul that this is the right path that I'm on. And whenever I write music, it makes me feel really good about it.
Okay, I dig that, man. I dig that. I love how the music makes you feel, man. You get to hear passion from your voice, though. You just mentioned one of your albums, though. You have one out as well, Projekt Gemineye, as well as though you also have some singles out right now, and I think your last album out that you had, The Lost Generation.
Yeah.
Can you speak about these wonderful titles that I love as well too, and where people can catch your music?
Sure. So I have a Bandcamp channel, like most musicians, I'm sure these days have one. Just under the Projekt Gemineye name, it's simple enough. The thing you just have to keep in mind when you look it up is that I spell Projekt Gemineye slightly different. I spell it Jekt instead of C, and I put as an IEYE instead of INI. So if you just mind that spelling, then you'll find me no matter what online on the Bandcamp end of things. But the single that I just put out is called The Lost Generation. It's going to be on my new record that comes out on Halloween, which is called Canada Stories and Legends, which is basically it's sort of like a love letter to Canada, the country that I've grown up in, because my whole basis on that is that when I was younger, I'd never gotten out of my own province when, up until the age of 20. So I knew very little about Canada. But when I started touring with my bands that I was in and stuff like that, I discovered how great Canada was. I met a lot of great people on the East Coast. They were very giving people on the East Coast. I find if you go and play a show over on, let's say, Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island, if they find out that you're touring a band, they'll invite you back to their house, to stay over. They'll make you a meal. They're very great people over on the East Coast of Canada. And then, you go over to the West Side, it's the same thing, but they're sort of different. They're more metropolitan people. They're very supportive over there. But I just learned more about my country as I toured, and I just wanted to kind of put that experience into words in this record, like the different things that I discovered and the different stories and stuff. Because especially when I went to the East Coast, a lot of the older generation were very keen on telling us about the legends of Canada, like ghost ships and stuff like that they heard as they were young and grew up. So I put some of these stories into song now for people to kind of discover on their own terms, right? So that's some of the things that I did on this record. But the single that you mentioned, The Lost Generation, touches on sort of a black eye for Canada. One thing I wanted to make sure was that when I wrote this album, I didn't want it just to be a big, pat on the back fest. I wanted to also show that Canada has its issues as well, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the issues was the whole the native culture here, the Indian natives here, how back in the day the children were taken from their communities and put into special schools, and they wanted to try to make them more Christian here according to their church, right? Which was sort of a black eye for our nation to do that. And a lot of these children never ended up returning back to their families, and years later in the 2000s they discovered a few unmarked graves where there were native children found that were buried in unmarked graves. So it's sort of it's a story that's not very favorable in Canada's, as far as Canada goes. But I figured that, when I talk about the great stuff, you also have to put in some of the stuff that makes us, we have to take account for as well with stuff like that, right?
Yeah, you do, really do. I love that, man. I definitely love that, man. The history, putting it all into a song, man, and definitely pulling your passion out, I think is definitely tremendous. Though, what do you do to basically get into the mood? Are you always, I know you said you write just about every day, or make some music. I know life definitely be life in, and you got ups and downs though. I mean, you get yourself into a mood where it's like, okay, I'm focused now, and I'm about to go and write some stuff and make some music.
Well, one of the things I enjoy doing, and I do this also because as I've gotten older, I've started to develop a few issues with arthritis and stuff like that. So one of the things that my doctor has told me to keep in my regimen is to do some sort of continual exercise. And one of the things I enjoy doing is I love doing long walks. So every day I do two 1 hour long walks. And what I tend to do at that time is I'll put on my headphones, go out, walk outside, and I'll listen to various different podcasts, musically related or technically related. Like for example, I listened to your podcast just the other day. I was mentioned to you off screen here before we started. I was listening to a couple of yours that were fantastic, by the way, very informative. And I really enjoyed listening to them. I made sure I subscribed, so I'll be listening to more in the future for sure. Thank you. And I enjoy those kind of things. I find these things kind of, influence me, get me charged up. When I hear these stories about people meeting other musicians and how it inspired them to write, it gives me that fuel to go and write my own music. And I also love hearing podcasts about the technical end of things, because while I write songs, I also record them myself, mix them, and master them as well. So I like listening to podcasts where you have one's called Mixing with the Masters, where they talk about different techniques for mixing albums and different techniques for mastering, and what kind of new equipment is available for doing this sort of stuff, and keeping up with technology and stuff like that. So those are the kind of things that really inspire me as well. And also sports. I'll be honest, I love sports. I love watching football, and soccer was a big thing when I was a child growing up. My father was a huge soccer person. So of course, as a young boy, he re-enrolled me into soccer, and he was, of course, my coach at the time, which was sort of, sometimes a little touchy, because, when you bring soccer home with you as well, it's a little rough in the house sometimes when that happens, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, sports were a big thing as well. And as I mentioned to you as well, wrestling was a huge thing for me growing up as well.
Okay, cool. Before we get into the wrestling, though, you said you're a football, so is it the NFL or what team you be rooting for?
Okay, I'm sure I gotta be careful here when I talk about football, because I know people are very passionate about their teams and stuff like that. So, but growing up, it's funny. I was always an NFL guy, even though we have CFL here in Canada. I was never into the CFL thing, because I didn't understand why we would have a 3-down system as opposed to a 4-down like you guys have in the NFL, right? I'm like, why would we have 3 down? It doesn't make any sense. So I watch NFL all the time. In fact, I think we have it on TV right now in the house upstairs in the living room. So NFL is a big thing. And my big team growing up was the Bears, Chicago Bears. I was a big Jim McMahon guy, Refrigerator Perry, Peyton, all those guys were they were my guys growing up. And I remember I even had a big poster on my wall of Jim McMahon with that sort of general's outfit that he would wear. They, showing that he was the man on the team, right? And Refrigerator Perry, I remember he was a big star back in the day. People seem to forget that. I mean, I think Refrigerator Perry is probably the only football player that I can remember that actually they made a GI Joe doll out of at one point.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't tell me that Akins and those guys had any GI Joe dolls made of them. So I always thought. So I always thought that it was an interesting thing of how popular he became as a figure outside of football as well. So football's a big thing. I'm curious, what's your team?
Actually, my team right now is actually the Baltimore Ravens, though. So,
Oh, really?
we doing okay. Actually, who did we beat? I think we defeated the Commanders or something like that. Maybe the week prior or something. But I'm with the Baltimore Ravens, though. I'm from Washington D.C. Obviously, the Commanders, they're actually doing wonderful, though. But when I actually started to get into sports, though, the Washington, they were the Redskins at that point, but now they're the Commanders. They just the hometown team, and I wasn't a big football fan. It was just like, I guess I gotta like the hometown team. I guess though. Yeah, they were some trash. So I found, I started watching sports more, and I had a connection with Baltimore. Used to go there a lot with the wrestling events and stuff like that. 30 minutes, an hour away from DC. So so Baltimore Ravens is definitely my team, though. Hopefully they go all the way, though. Yeah, that's
Nice.
that's cool. That's cool. Also, all right, we're gonna definitely get into it. You mentioned you're a huge wrestling fan. What moment really got you into becoming a huge wrestling fan?
Back in the day, there was a television program here on Sundays called Maple Leaf Wrestling. Basically, Maple Leaf Gardens was down, in Toronto here, and they had
Okay.
a program that they would show every Sunday where they would put on different wrestlers that would wrestle, I guess, with the local talent here in Toronto, right? So you'd have like Big John Studd and Big John Studd, Jimmy Superfly Snooker, Cowboy Bob Orton, Roddy Piper, and all these guys would come into town, and they would wrestle some of the those no name guys that they would just get squashed all the time, right? And they would
Okay.
show them on this Maple Leaf Wrestling, and then every once in a while they would have like the big match at the end. So I remember one of the big matches at the end was Superfly Jimmy Snooker against a Cowboy Bob Orton. So that was like the last match of the program that day. So that really got me into wrestling at the time, and then Hulk Hogan became a big thing for me as well. I'd watch all those Saturday nights main events that they would start showing later on, in the 90s and stuff like that. And make sure I'd be always home for those whenever they would come on. But it's funny, later on, I found I started transitioning. I started watching a bit of WCW wrestling later when I started getting it on cable. But the big thing for me where I really got into it hardcore, and I'm curious to hear your comments about this, is I got into New Japan Pro Wrestling. I really got into the Japanese wrestling. So, Tetsuya Naito, Okada, Kenny Omega, all those guys that went through, that was my thing. I mean, I was a huge Kenny Omega guy when he was in Japan. I thought that he was easily one of the big guys down there that I thought was making a big impact on wrestling there, And I kept with it. I mean, nowadays I haven't watched it nearly as religiously. I keep making sure I watch the G1 tournament when that comes through, or like the best of the Super Juniors and stuff like that. Like those big tournaments, I try to make sure I keep on. But I'm curious, are you a big Japanese wrestling fan as well, or is it just mainly like WWE or?
Okay, Japanese wrestling. What I'm gonna say about that, I do like Japanese. I was introduced to Japanese, at least New Japan Pro Wrestling, a couple of years ago. Not even maybe 5-6 years ago, and I was like, oh man, really like these guys go at it though. I'm familiar with Kenny Omega, Okada, Shibata. Like a couple of guys, man. I know of them. But I grew up on, of course, I came in I came in 99, 98, about around the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Talk about WWE. WCW, I saw a couple of episodes of WCW, but I really wasn't, like, I knew my cousin at the time, he, was a big WCW fan. I go up their house, they had all the WCW video games. I knew of Goldberg, those guys like Goldberg and Just certain guys like over in WCW, I knew of them because of the video game and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
never really watched it. And now that AEW is out, being sort of like the second promotion behind WWE, it really wasn't that growing up for me though. So kind of like checking out AEW is kind of fun, to see another wrestling company or other
Yeah.
wrestling companies succeed though. WWE, I gotta say, it for me. I'm more of a. I like my wrestling though, but I grew up more so of the stories
Mm.
of what's going on, the promos, all of that. I feel like definitely goes hand in hand with what goes on in the ring, in the matches and stuff like that. So yeah, WWE is kind of like, yeah, obviously they're on fire right now, and let's be honest, they are literally the cream of the crop though. Like it's guys out there who grow up and want to play in professional football, and they want to go to the NFL. Unless they live in Canada, they definitely want to play for the Canadian Football League, and vice versa for WWE and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I grew up on WWE. My guy is The Rock though,
Oh
so
yeah, yeah,
yeah, the movie star Dwayne Johnson, yeah, right,
yeah.
yeah. Dwayne is cool though, but The Rock is my guy.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because the one thing that where there's the obvious difference between the wrestling companies, for example AEW and WWE, is that the WWE seems to want to commit to long-term storytelling, like with the whole Roman Reigns thing, for example, that stretched on for years, how long he was champion with that, and the different stories that went within him. Cody Rhodes coming in wanting to get the title off of him, and the whole issue with the Usos, and how that kind of worked out
Oh
between who was the
yeah.
leader of the tribe and stuff like that. So there was a lot of long-term storytelling
Mhm.
going on in there, and I think that that's what one of their strengths is, because if you look at some of the other companies, like New Japan doesn't focus on that sort of stuff at all. It's just basically
No.
good matches they want to put on, and that's it. If there is any story, it's very short, and it's all maybe 2-3 weeks, and then boom, we're on to something different, right? So New Japan is almost kind of looked at in my eyes like, if I want to go and see some aggressive wrestling or some really technical wrestling, I'll go and check that out. But if I want to invest into something long term, the WWE is more where you would want to go for something like that, right? Because Roman Reigns
Yeah.
was a guy that I was into since back in the Shield days. He was always my guy within Shield, and it was interesting how when that split, how the dynamic changed. Roman Reigns became the huge guy,
Mhm.
even though for a long time, as you know, he was not liked by the audience at all. He was booed constantly in arenas. He went
Mhm.
everywhere. And then funny how that dynamic changed later on when Heyman came in and all that stuff happened, right? But I was interested
Yeah.
how Moxley jumped ship and went over to AEW and started doing that, and now he's becoming sort of the head honcho. Well, I'm curious about that with you. Like, how did you feel at that? What do you think, that was a right move for Moxley to maybe do that, to jump ship like that?
I mean, looking back at hindsight, I'm like, nah, I wish he would have stayed. But looking at it now, I think he is doing one of the greatest runs that he got right now in AEW. Though I think that is definitely phenomenal. Though I feel like if he would have stayed, I don't know if he would have progressed or went the direction that he would have went as being John Moxley. Though I feel like John Moxley, but even the story that he's telling right now that he got, in AEW, I think is tremendously though. But eventually, when he does come back, I hope he keeps his name. The name John
Yeah,
Moxley. I think it'll be, phenomenal though. One thing that you did mention about watching New Japan, they gonna deliver straight matches. And I think that's one thing with AEW. They try with the storytelling. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But they're
yeah,
really good at having dope matches though. So AEW also has, because I don't really get New Japan all like that. So, AEW is a sort of a good gateway for those guys to come in for the
yeah.
American, viewers and learn about them and check them out and stuff like that. So that's really dope, about as far as that though.
Yeah, because I mean, it's interesting how They've brought in people like Osprey now and stuff like that, and Ricochet's now in with AEW, and those guys just had like one of some great matches now as well, where they're high flyers and they do a lot of these things where people just can't even believe what they're seeing when they see these guys getting aerial and jumping around. I mean, the dynamic with the wrestling now is really interesting. I mean, one other thing, and I just wanted to just ask you about the Moxley thing, just because I know that you're very educated in the wrestling thing. I'm just curious about this from your perspective. He's allowed to go to many things outside of the company. That's part of his contract, where he can go to independents and wrestle and stuff like that as well. What do you think that it's smart for him to be going to do, like, for example, some of these hardcore matches? I see him with these light bulbs being smashed over his head and stuff like that. I mean, I almost wonder if that's a smart thing for him to be doing, because that could have long-term repercussions on his long-term career, don't you think?
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I think, yeah, of course, that'll have long-term repercussions, just as well as like Darby Allin right now. I feel
Yeah,
like the guy ain't gonna be able to walk in maybe like 10, 15 years or whatever like that. But that's the thing about AEW. AEW gets these guys and they got these contracts where they can go off and perform on the weekend, or or go over to New Japan and work some matches and do stuff like that. I think that is definitely phenomenal. But do I agree that these guys should be having death matches though? Nah, not really though. I mean, like, if you look at the average wrestler, from the 80s, the 70s, maybe the
yeah,
90s, though, like, they barely could walk. And some
yeah,
of them are not really alive like that, like, sad to say, but I don't think, I had a guy, I was doing a watch along, and I had a guy join the live chat, and he was like, I don't watch WWE or whatever the case like that, or I don't watch certain type of wrestling. I just watch death matches. I'm like, hey, whatever floats your boat. If you like death matches, that's totally fine though.
yeah,
I'm not trying to see two guys kill each other. I think maybe that's a little bit extreme. I mean, I watch
yeah,
boxing, UFC, seeing somebody get knocked out. That's a little difference though, I mean, they are
yeah,
going to be told stop the match or whatever, but yeah, like, I think that is a little extreme for me though, as far as the light bulbs and all that other stuff though. For the moment,
yeah.
cool to see, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, yeah. So, I mean, again, I mean, that's one of the things I find that keep my interest outside of the music area. So, I enjoy the wrestling end of things.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, all right, we're gonna move on, you guys. Before we get to our next segment, Mark, what inspires you? What keeps you motivated to this day?
Well, again, I think the main thing that keeps me motivated is really just the music. I mean, I've never been one of these people who kind of just lives in the past. I mean, as I get older, I find that a lot of people in my age group, which is, I just turned 50 like not long ago. And a lot of people my age, I find, are starting to like say, "Oh, I don't buy any new music anymore. I just tend to buy music from the bands I grew up with, like back in the '70s and the '80s." And I can understand that people like the music that they grew up with, but I've always been somebody who likes looking to the future and seeing what's going to be coming down the line. Like, 'cause when we're not here, the music's going to still be here, and I'm curious to see what's going to be coming down the line. I mean, people were kind of made comments about this band called Greta Van Fleet. They're like, "Oh, they're just a Led Zeppelin ripoff." But I always had the argument where, these guys are like 20 years old. They're kids, okay? And if they're keeping rock and roll music alive in this day and age, I think it's a good thing. So I always kind of support when new kids come up with with bands and are keeping rock music alive, or any music alive, whether it's soul or funk, or rock and roll, or whatever it is. I mean, to see what's fresh in you, I'm more interested in that than working backwards. So my inspiration is the music and new music to see what's happening.
Okay, I definitely dig that, man. Definitely dig that. It's one of the staple questions here on the show. I like to ask my guests. Definitely what keeps them motivated and inspired. Definitely in this crazy world we live in, man. For real, I appreciate that. Definitely,
Yeah, man.
definitely. All right, you guys, man. We're gonna keep the podcast rolling on, you guys, man. It's time for the. I almost got tongue tied. All right, you guys, it's time for the 11:30 podcast hot seat. You guys. Right, all right, all right. It's time for the hot seat, Mark. I got 5 questions for you, and we're gonna roll with it. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, all right. If you could, if you had a movie that was coming out about you, who would play you in the movie?
Ooh, who would play me in the movie? That's a good question. You know what? I always like Tom Hanks. I've always loved him. I loved his acting. I think that he could probably do a good job with it.
Yeah, Tom Hanks, man, definitely. I think he'd kill it, man. He'd definitely kill it. Okay, I dig that. I dig that. Okay, if you could work with anyone, future, past, or present, in the music industry, who would it be?
Oh, Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers from Chic. He worked on a few records with David Bowie, and I'm a huge David Bowie fan. And I thought that the records that he worked on with him, whether it was Let's Dance or what was that other record he did? I not slipping my mind, but Black Tie, White Noise. Those records were always records that were a big change in his style, but were also very impactful in the music scene. So I'd say Nile Rodgers.
Okay, I like that answer. I like it. Okay, do you have any regrets? If so, why?
Uh, the only regret I maybe have is that I wish I would have took some chances earlier on in my career as far as touring. I mean, back in the day when I was a bit younger, I was a little uncertain about the uncertainty of touring. You know, what happens if this happens? And rather than just saying go for it and worry about things when they happen and stop worrying about what could happen, that's my biggest regret. Is I wish I would have started touring earlier in my life.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Okay, if you had a warning label on you, what would it say?
Do not piss off. That's that's probably the label I put on. I mean, I'm a really easygoing guy, but I always found, and my parents said the same thing, is that once I've been pushed past by a red line, I get a little difficult to deal with. So
Okay, I dig that. I dig that. I like asking that. I like asking that question. I thought it's always entertaining. You get different answers from that question, though. Okay, last one. You're a huge wrestling fan. Okay, what is your favorite match? Or if you don't have a favorite match, what is one fantasy booking match that you would love to see?
this for me is really easy, actually. My favorite match was Kenny Omega in the G1 when he won the G1, that final match that he had. I forget the gentleman's name who he wrestled against. It was one of the big Japanese guys at the time, and he had won the G1 a few times. I wish I remember his name. But the match when Kenny Omega won that, because he was the first non-Japanese wrestler to win the G1 when that happened back in the day there. So that's always been my favorite match. And actually, and a runner-up one I'll just say really quickly was the match between Kenny Omega and Juice Robinson, where Juice Robinson got the sneak roll-up pin on him and beat him in the G1, and that he was absolutely shocked to the point of where he almost fainted. He thought that he didn't believe that he beat Kenny Omega. That was more of a comical match though, but that's another one that's high on my list.
Okay, cool. I definitely dig that, man. One of my favorite matches, definitely is The Rock versus Hulk Hogan. Rock versus Hulk
Yes.
Hogan, WrestleMania 18. Because I'm a huge Rock fan, and just the whole, just throwdown at the beginning of the match, looking back and forth, and how The Rock was getting booed and people were cheering for Hogan. That gotta be one of my favorite just matches, though. I think it's not even just about the athleticism, because both guys wouldn't that athleticism, to
Yeah.
like Kenny Omega or something like that. Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, those guys are like creative characters. If you ask me, like all types of moves. It's crazy, man. I love it, especially Will Ospreay, man. But yeah, I definitely dig it. Yo, Mark, I appreciate you. I'm trying to block out the sun. I'm looking all crazy now, but I appreciate you here on the 11:30 podcast episode this week. Before you go, man, any questions, any shout outs, anything you would like to say?
Well, I'd like to say thank you, Dre, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I was really hoping to branch out and go into some different podcasts, and your podcast is definitely one that I'm very pleased that I got onto. You're a great guy, and I love your podcast. So I hope in the future maybe we can talk again with some stuff, either wrestling or music or whatever you want later on. And I'll keep in touch. And thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime, my guy. I would love to have you on, again, definitely to talk more wrestling, to pick your brain on, the 90s wrestling, today's wrestling, or whatever wrestling it is, man. So, or
Absolutely.
even music too. So I definitely wish you the best on everything you're doing right now. Once again, everyone, the links will be down below in the description. Definitely make sure you go follow Mark. Make sure you go stream his latest single, and definitely get a copy of the latest album for real. Once again, Mark, thank you for coming through here on the 11:30 podcast show. For everyone, man, who's watching and tuning in, please sit tight, stay tuned. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna wrap up the show. We're gonna come back. We got the WTF moment and more. Don't move. You're listening and you're watching to the 11:30 podcast.
He is unique. We match other world-class cities pound for pound in dining, nightlife, arts, culture, theater, sports, outdoor activities, green spaces, and the list goes on and on. But nowhere else can compete with our monuments, our museums, and memorials. And no other city has as many free things to do. Add it all up, and DC's diversity of experiences is truly unmatched. There's only one DC.
Yo, we back here on the 11:30 podcast show. Appreciate everyone sticking with me throughout the break. Yo, Mark, thank you for coming through here on the 11:30 podcast show this week. It was a great time chopping it up with you, my guy, from, music, just you getting into it, everything, man. All the latest links and the albums are down below, so definitely make sure you go stream it, as well as, being a real big sports fan. I'm a big wrestling fan, so it was really awesome to chat with Mark here on the 11:30 podcast this week, man. Really great having them on, you guys, man. But before the break, you know what I said, man. We gonna wrap it up. Before we gonna wrap it up, man, we got the WTF moment, and let's go, man. It's time for the WTF moment of the week, you guys. Yes, all right, WTF moment of the week. Yo, my fiance, definitely, she was talking about this, and she kind of like mentioned it to me the other day, and we follow different people on TikTok or social media, so I was like, damn, you about to be my news lady though in a minute. Yo, but I don't know if you guys heard about the situation, I guess, with the girl working at Walmart that was pushed into the oven, I believe, or whatever like that. I don't have all the details, man. I just know that she was, burnt, alive, and it was real sad and unfortunate. But you guys haven't heard about the situation, man, definitely check this out.
Candles flicker at this growing makeshift memorial outside the Walmart at the center of this unimaginable tragedy, where a 19-year-old employee was found dead Saturday inside a store bakery's oven.
It's a nightmare. I feel sorry for the family, the co-workers. It's very shocking. It's very sad.
She's been identified by members of the Sikh community here as Gursimran Kaur. She recently came to Canada with her mother from the UK. Balder Singh from the Maritime Sikh Society spoke with Gursimran's mother and says he's now working to bring her father to Canada too.
If the husband comes here, that will be a really good thing for the family.
The Walmart was still open Saturday when a 911 call was made around 9:20 p.m. The Sikh Society says Kaur's mother also works at the store and had been frantically looking for her daughter. Gursimran apparently hadn't been seen for several hours, and ultimately it was her mother who made the terrible discovery.
When she noticed that her phone is not responding, after a while, she found her body in that oven, and that's really sad.
Just how could this have happened? Police have only confirmed the young woman was in a walk-in bakery oven, the kind often used in large grocery and retail stores.
Police are calling this a very complex investigation and are also warning members of the public not to share speculation on social media.
Just be patient with our investigation and let us do our job.
The story now making headlines around the world and on social media. Fundraising for the family has surpassed its goal in less than 24 hours. Walmart says employees are receiving psychological support, and those who'd been scheduled to work are getting paid while the store remains closed. Singh.
WTF, man. WTF all the way. Like, it seemed as though maybe she had a vendetta with either another coworker or maybe someone who knew she worked there, and it was just like, I don't know. Maybe because if it was someone maybe who didn't work there, they, had to figure out how to work that, oven machine thing, and I feel like it had to been someone, a coworker who had a vendetta with her and just, pushed her in there and cut it on, man. So, yeah, WTF, man. Like, the world we are living in is real crazy, man. Real crazy. I hope everybody stay safe out there. Tomorrow is Halloween. Get spooky. Get all the candy. For real. Or just stay in the house and watch Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4, Child's Play. Who knows, man? For real, man. Just stay safe out there and be safe, man. The holiday season is definitely coming up, man. Yo, man, this has been definitely a great episode. Mark, once again, thank you for coming through here on the 1130 podcast show. Also, before I roll on out of here, I want to thank everyone who tuned in to my very first blog, and I will be starting doing more. Buying more equipment as far as tripods and things that are accessible for me, so I can be able to record more content and stuff like that and do more and continue to grow. But yeah, man, I did my first vlog, man. Me and my son, we went to the store, we chilled, went to the playground and stuff like that, man. And definitely, if you haven't checked it out, make sure you go check it out, man, and tap into it. I appreciate it a lot. I thank everyone for supporting the podcast and definitely been live doing the watch alongs for Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown. Major support. Thank everyone who for subscribing and checking out the episode, and as well as doing Talk Pro Wrestling Commission Talks and the guys. So, but for now, you guys, man, I'm about to head on out here and wrap it up. I'm gonna see you guys next time here on the 1130 podcast show. Yo, it's your man Dre, aka Dre on Wheels. Stay smooth, stay smooth, be easy, be good, man. For real. Give all the glory to God. Won't he do it? Yo, it's your man Dre. And I'm out, man. See you next time.